And your book blurb, if you write it like a summary that stops where the spoilers start, it has no momentum. It won't sell your book. It falls flat. It's often too long. And this is where you get authors starting to ask, well, what belongs in a book blurb, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But if you're trying to, write a full summary, of course it's hard to decide what belongs in your book blurb because it feels like everything should be in there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unfiltered Voices, the podcast that is all about busting the myth that self-published is second-rate. I'm Kelly Nissen. I'm an author coach and a self-published author, and I'll be talking to authors, illustrators, and other self-published industry professionals about their choices, their journeys, and everything in between. So stick around. Today, I'm talking to blurb writer and coach, Jessie Cunniffe. Welcome to Unfiltered Voices, Jessie, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is awesome. So, a little bit about Jessie before we start. Jessie Cunniffe is a professional blurb writer and blurb book coach. That's a tongue twister, that one. A book blurb coach, sorry, from Sydney in Australia. She's a passionate advocate of the indie author community and has dedicated herself to taking the pain out of blurb writing and with her custom blurb services and her two signature courses, Book Blurb Magic and the Spicy Blurb Playbook, which I don't think I've actually seen. I have to go and have a look. On the occasion that Jessie manages to snatch a little bit of reading time, she's probably buried in PG Wodehouse. Is that Wodehouse or Woodhouse?
It's Woodhouse, but
It
yeah, it's
is
spelled Woodhouse,
Woodhouse.
isn't it?
Ah, okay. Well, there you go. There's a typo. Or Agatha Christie. So, just to start us off, Jessie, blurb writing. I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm like, oh, I'm interviewing Jessie Cunniffe on the show, and they're like, oh, what does she write? And I said she writes blurbs, and they're like, "Now, surely there's not a business in that." So there's a lot of people out there probably thinking, how on earth do you make a full career out of something that's essentially just these random words that you chuck on the back of a book? Um, or is it that? So your catchphrase is a book blurb is not a summary. So what is it, Jessie? Tell us more.
I'm so happy that you said this is your catchphrase because it means that I've said it enough. It means that I've said it enough that it's like it is a catchphrase now. That really excited me. Yes, a book blurb is not a summary, and that's kind of like if your listeners take nothing else away from this interview, let it be that. A summary is essentially, like when you go to Wikipedia and you want to spoil the plot and it just tells you everything, spoilers and all. Summary, synopsis, same thing. Book blurb is a piece of sales copy. Now, I want to clarify something before we go any further because there's actually two definitions of the word blurb, which is really irritating. And I spent half my life explaining them because who knows, like the English language just evolves with no rhyme or reason. So essentially, the first blurbs were actually those celebrity endorsement quotes that you see on the front cover of books sometimes. It'll be Stephen King
Okay.
or Obama being like, the book of the summer, I couldn't put this down, blah, blah, blah. So if you're talking to people in trad publishing, when they say, oh, we've got to get people to blurb your book or you've got to go out and get blurbs for your book, that is what they're talking about. They're asking you to send your book off to other people, whose names people know and ask them to say nice things about your book. That's not what I do. I will say nice things about your book, but you don't pay me to do that. I write the back cover book description. Okay, so those couple of paragraphs on the back that actually show us the story, or if you're a nonfiction author, give us like an idea of what transformation or information you're conveying to us. So when I'm talking about book blurbs, I do exclusively mean that description. And I think it's because it can often feel a bit like a summary. We sort of go, okay, we look at the back cover and we go, I got an idea of what's in the story. But the reason that I'm so particular about distinguishing those two words is that a summary or a synopsis really should have your whole story in it. It really is every single plot point. And your book blurb, if you write it like a summary that stops where the spoilers start, it has no momentum. It won't sell your book. It falls flat. It's often too long. And this is where you get authors starting to ask, well, what belongs in a book blurb, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But if you're trying to, write a full summary, of course it's hard to decide what belongs in your book blurb because it feels like everything should be in there. So, learning to write a book blurb is actually learning about pulling out the 1 to 2 things, and I really am very serious about that, 1 to 2 things that will sell your book, that will get people excited about your book, and focusing on those and learning to build momentum through the book blurb so it doesn't just kind of randomly end with no spoilers. It actually ends with tension and on a bit of an upbeat. So people really need to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is so much to learn about book blurbs now. I've seen you in action with the blurb on the back of one of my books, and I know that it is equally as difficult, if not more difficult, than that piece of writing that every author I've ever spoken to dreads, which is the synopsis, which you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before. So, as you said, like the synopsis is it's everything, but
Mm-hmm.
not absolutely everything. But the book blurb has to leave you with that little bit of tension where
Yeah.
you go, oh my God, I have to read this.
Yes.
So, which is, and a synopsis is like, oh, I know the end of the story now, so that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
let's just talk about disasters for a moment. And I'm not talking about, because I know you wouldn't have had any disasters, but you would have come
Oh, I'm sure there's a few in my past.
um, you would have come across some really shudder-worthy blurbs,
Mm.
and maybe asked yourself, what went wrong. So, what would you say is the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to write their own blurb? And if I hear what I did in there, then I'll know you're talking about me.
Look, actually, the biggest mistake is trying to write it like a summary. I think that's probably the number one thing that I see. So then we get like, lots of details that we don't actually need,
Mm,
and it ends up being too long. But I think actually something else that a lot of authors don't think about, because I think it's not said enough, is they don't actually think about how the blurb looks. And the blurb actually has to
mm,
be aesthetically pleasing. Like you actually have to, if we look at the blurb and it's a big chunk of, long sentences, big words, whatever, and our eye goes, oh, that looks a bit hard, then we're out. The people
mm,
reading your book blurb aren't very invested in your book yet. They're slightly invested. They've picked it up or they've heard about it or they've searched it or they've scrolled, across it. But you can't make it hard work for them to find out what your book is about. And I think the most shudder-worthy, as you put it, blurbs that I've seen are the ones where I have to work so hard to figure out what genre we even are in because there are so many details that don't seem relevant and I can't get a grasp on the direction of the story. I have no sense of momentum. It doesn't feel like one layer builds on another layer. And I kind of get halfway through and go, well, this is too much hard work. I don't know what's going on. So I think that's something really important to keep in mind is when you look at your blurb, ideally we should have 1 or 2 standalone lines. Like I like, the headline to be a standalone line.
mm,
And then occasionally you'll have another standalone line, maybe somewhere halfway through. Consider where people's eyes land as they skim, for example. Consider the beginning and the end of each paragraph, which again is where our eyes tend to land if we're being lazy and flitting through. And
mm.
are those parts juicy? Are they interesting? Do they make us want to stop and stay a while? Or is it like, oh, I got to backtrack. I didn't quite get that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just as you're talking there, I'm just running through blurbs in the back of my mind, just thinking, okay, yeah, there is a lot out there that are just those big slabs of
Yes.
paragraphs that,
Yes.
for me, I'm like, look at the cover, look at the blurb,
Mm-hmm.
maybe buy the book, and that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. But it is all about those two elements a lot of the time, I think. So you're obviously, and we were talking before, and I actually know how hard it is to get into, get a blurb done with you. You're obviously, you're not short of business, which again, this is for a lot of people like, "Yeah, but she only writes blurbs." What actually inspired you to start writing blurbs? What made you sit there and go, huh, I think I might start an entire business just writing the blurbs for the back.
Look, I wish that I was clever enough to see that gap in the market and go, wow, let's do this. But the truth is, I was still working as a music teacher when I first started writing blurbs. That was my first career. I spent 13 years in schools. And in 2020, I had like one less day of work a week, and I knew I wanted to write. And I knew that I only wanted to write short projects because I've always gravitated towards short form. And also, I was a bit lazy. I was a bit like, I don't want to work on big rambling. I don't know. I wasn't going to edit whole manuscripts. I didn't want to write, I've written press releases and things like that. I was like, it's too much. Like, I just want to write a few paragraphs. And I had just watched my husband go through and self-publish his books. He's a Latinist. He published some Latin language books on
Mm.
Amazon. He did it all himself, and he wrote the blurbs himself. And I mean, for him, it was a breeze. He's annoyingly smart. He just kind of did it with very little fuss. But I was watching the process, and I was like, well, the blurb is short. Like maybe I've always loved marketing and sales. I thought that sounds like a kind of fun thing to write. And it's short. Like I cannot stress enough how lazy I was in thinking like I just want to write something short. And so I hopped onto Fiverr, which is an awesome place to start my business, it turned out. And I just was writing blurbs for 20 bucks a pop and was like, let's just see. I genuinely thought authors would tell me to get lost, because they're like, I've written this whole book. How dare you tell me that I need help writing this back cover? And instead, what happened was like this outpouring of authors coming to me saying, oh my gosh, I've been through 3 blurb writers, 5 blurb writers, 7 blurb writers. You're the only one who's got it right. Or I went through 25 drafts of this blurb myself. I can't believe you've just done it in one. Like just this outpouring of pain and gratitude. And I thought, oh my goodness, like I've very accidentally hit on something that people are really struggling with. And at the same time, I was really enjoying working with authors, working in music before. I love working with creatives. And I kind of started to think, wow, okay, this could be a thing. And I mean, my year on Fiverr was insane. Like I had more work than I knew what to do with. I was writing 5, 10, 11 blurbs a week. It was like I was working to all hours of the night, and it was the best apprenticeship I could have had. I've written for pretty much every single genre out there, and it was just so exciting and so fun. And I mean, I'm entirely
Yeah.
self-taught. It was the best kind of experience I could get working directly with these authors. I offered unlimited revisions, which I still do actually, on all of my blurbs so that I could be sure that what I was giving them was what they wanted and they felt able to say, oh, this has to change. So I learned a lot from authors as well.
Mm.
And then it just kind of got insane. I took my work off Fiverr. I started Book Blurb Magic, and I then had so much work that I had to quit my teaching job. So like it was accidental, Kelly. That's the truth. It was accidental, but it's
Yeah.
just such a fun niche to have fallen into.
Yeah.
And I think there really is this huge need for great book blurbs, because what I was realizing is not only was this something authors were struggling with, they were struggling to find someone to help them.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yes.
lifelong teacher, I was like, I gotta help you. So
Yes.
that's what I'm doing.
Yes. And I just love that you've essentially created this almost one of a kind, really flourishing business
Mm.
out of a sense of laziness.
Yeah.
So no, there's no room for laziness in your life anymore, I think. Um, so we've touched on this just very briefly, but blurbs really they sit right at that edge of between sort of marketing and like copy and creativity.
Mm.
So in what way do blurbs actually really contribute towards overall book marketing and reader conversion? Like, are there any stats on that sort of thing?
I feel like there are stats that I have to put an asterisk beside and say, I heard this from a publisher, like off the record,
Mm.
or do you know what I mean? Like, there's I haven't found any cold, hard stats. It's, Amazon probably has them all and they're not sharing them with us or whatever. But I have heard some publishers say the blurb accounts for 80% of the buying decision, which is enormous.
Mm.
And the
That's
main sort of,
massive.
oh, it's huge. It's really
Yeah.
huge. And certainly what I'm hearing from readers online and stuff, like you'll have readers saying, can we please do away with trope lists? I want to know what the story is. And then
Mm.
similarly, there will always be readers who will just buy a book because of the pretty cover and dive in without reading the blurb. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that because I have to read every blurb for every book I ever read. But there are readers who'll be like, I never read a blurb. I just jump in. But the publishers, I mean, I sort of look to the trad publishers in the sense that like, well, if it wasn't working, if it wasn't doing anything, they wouldn't be bothering, would they?
Mm.
So they're obviously all still doing it. But also, what I thought was really interesting is that several of my clients have sent me their BookBub graphs of showing what contributed to the people deciding to buy their book, review their book, whatever it was that they were doing on BookBub. And in all of them, look, the cover ranked really high, but the blurb beat it
Mm.
by about 2%. Two
Oh,
percentage points.
nice.
And I think that's so fascinating because obviously we know the cover is super, super, super important. And I would actually honestly see them as equal. I see them as equals. And the cover sells the click, the blurb sells the book. right? Like
Yeah.
that's, makes the sale for you. So to me, they really are equal. So if you are pouring money and love into your cover, make sure you pour money and love into your blurb because they really do work in partnership. And
100%.
when you think about it, we like the blurb is a product description. We
Mm.
read product descriptions for pretty much everything that we buy. You're going to go buy a saucepan. You want to check that it's the right kind of non-stick or not non-stick because that's toxic. Or, like those are product descriptions, right? We are always looking
Yeah.
for information about what we want to buy. And yeah, sure, books definitely rank as an item that can very much be an impulse purchase. We don't, it's not like we're laying down a grand to to buy a book. But
Not yet, anyway.
well, no. A lot of the time, people do want, like, sure, it might be an impulse purchase, but people are also going, well, am I going to invest a week, a month? Some people are faster readers than that, but I'm slow in this one story, right? So you're
Mm.
actually, you've got people will tend to sort of think twice about that, depending on what kind of book they're buying and whatnot as well. So it's important, I think, to remember that people like to feel confident before they hand you their money. And they
Mm.
can't necessarily know you, the author, before they buy your book if they find it randomly in the bookstore or randomly on Amazon. Um, but if they go, wow, your story sounds so good, I'm curious to spend some time in that world, then they can feel
Mm.
comfortable and confident that what they see on the cover is what they're going to get.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
speeds up the purchasing process a lot.
Absolutely. So, um, we've got a lot of our listeners here are writers of fiction, and there's a few like non-fiction as well. But most people are probably wondering, what they should include. So this is like the nuts and bolts. If
Mm.
they're going to write the blurb themselves or have a crack at writing the blurb, and good luck. Seriously, it's probably harder than a synopsis, actually, now that I think of it. What are those essential ingredients of a high converting fiction blurb, if you like?
Great. That's the $1 million question, right? So I've actually collated all of that info into handy dandy PDF, which will be linked below here, but it's anatomyofabookblurb.com. A bit of a mouthful URL now that I say it, but that essentially will give you my fiction and non-fiction advice for what you need to include. So you don't have to race off for a notepad. You can just keep listening and chill out. But essentially, what we want in a high converting fiction blurb, I think that a good hook is non-negotiable. And by a hook, because lots of people have different definitions for this, I mean like the headline of your blurb. Think of it like, good clickbait, right? It's
Mm.
irresistible. I don't like to put essential information into the hook. I like to focus on the atmosphere, the genre. Sometimes with, romance and things, we might try and make it a bit tropey. But essentially, we want that. The one job of that hook is to get readers to read the next part of the blurb, right?
Mm.
So we want to just suck them in and go, oh, hang on, like, whoa, that sounds weird. I need to know more. Like, give us the details. Then the next thing that we really need to understand is the inciting incident of your book. And this, I think, is the real moneymaker and something that often gets buried in long or unwieldy blurbs. The inciting incident is that moment of no return. It's the reason we're reading your book now. It's when Bilbo gives Frodo the ring and he's like, "Oh my God, I've got to go, go to Mordor now," right? Like nothing
Yeah.
is ever the same after that. Your character loses a job, they get broken up with, they move countries, whatever. And what we need to understand, so the inciting incident is the star of your book blurb. And what we need then is just enough context around it to understand why the inciting incident is huge. For
Mm.
example, if the inciting incident is that your character suddenly discovers at age 15 that they can turn themselves invisible, there's a big difference between whether or not they're living in our world, because that's not normal, or they're living in the world that you've created where maybe it's normal for kids to learn how to become invisible when they're 8 instead. So this kid now is like, they're a late bloomer and it's embarrassing or whatever else, right? So we actually need just enough context around the inciting incident so that the inciting incident hits home. For other, let's say, quote unquote, real world inciting incidents, you might need less. Like your character losing your job, not able to make rent. That's something we all instantly understand. That's a bad thing in pretty much everyone's world, right? So
Yeah.
depending on what world we're in and how unusual or how relatable your inciting incident is, we need more or less context. But the idea is to get to the inciting incident as quickly as possible in your blurb because it tells the
Mm.
reader, this is why you're reading the book now. This is the story is happening now. And from there, we then need to look at the fallout of the inciting incident. So I like to make sure that I'm not including information that's any further than like 25%, 30% at a push through the book. Like 25% is a
Mm.
better ballpark to go, but and it will depend on the pacing of your plot, and everyone's book is different, etc. But we really don't want to be including anything beyond that, and that is very, very important because the blurb can actually set up the pacing of your book. And so, for example,
Mm.
if you put something in your blurb that's 80% of the way through your book, readers assume there's kind of like an assumed pacing with blurbs where we assume it's the first 25% or so. Readers aren't necessarily going through that maths, but like that's sort of roughly how they're thinking. And they will get really angry if you've made the climax sound like it's the inciting incident. And then they're reading your book going, where's the thing happening? I don't know. And they get to the climax and you ruined it for me. You put it in the blurb. What are you doing? So really important not to go beyond that 25, max 30% range in
Mm.
terms of information you include. Anything beyond that has to be a hint and a very elusive kind of hint. So then we want to look at the fallout. So okay, this 15-year-old kid discovers they can turn themselves invisible. So they turn themselves invisible, they steal a football from the school sports closet, and then they get in trouble and they have to go on the run, right? There's the fallout. And that's usually happening, whatever it is that's sort of happening fairly early on in your book, starts a journey, starts a quest, whatever it is, right? And from there we then need to build tension. Building tension without giving away the spoilers is the hardest part.
Oh, yeah.
um, it's really quite tricky, and what the way I like to think of it is you kind of have to show them the path without being able to see where the path ends. So we want to give them a
Mm.
taste of, you look down the path and you're like, oh, there's a really dark forest there, like that looks spooky. Or you look down and you go, oh, it looks like it might be leading towards a beach. We want to give them a sense of what direction we're going without actually seeing the full destination.
Mm.
So the tone, the vocabulary that you choose is very important. And often what we want to highlight towards the end is like the crucial dilemma, or, biggest obstacle. What's the worst case scenario in your character's mind? There are so many variables. It's difficult for me to encapsulate perfectly for everyone in this, but that's essentially where we're sort of leading. If you focus on the inciting incident, what you will find is that, the typical blurb word count we're aiming for is between 150 and 180 words. Shorter if
Mm.
you can manage it, but I find that a sweet spot seems to be around 160 words for most fiction. That means you can get enough plot across, enough detail, enough excitement and color and nuance without overdoing it. And like I say, like for crime and things like that, it's often possible to do it in 130, 140
Mm.
kind of situation as well. If you focus on the inciting incident, it means that it's much easier to stick to that word limit because you have a focal point and you're not trying to condense, like cram everything in. You're starting from one thing and building out around it, and then you can kind of stop once you get
Mhm.
to the limits. It's a very different experience, I find, than trying to squash down your story.
Yes. Oh God, yes. So there's there's so many things. Like I don't know about listeners, but my head's just like boom, it's just exploding at the moment. It's so many little bits of gold in there. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring writer who's really, they might have written a blurb, they're a little bit unsure about it. Um, what should they do?
Mm. I think one of the most important things and my biggest piece of advice is to recognize that this is a really separate skill
Mm.
from writing your book. Like I haven't written a novel. I've written and edited over 1,000 blurbs by this point. I have not written a novel. They're very different skills. It's on my to-do list one day, but it's a really different skill. Just because I'm good at writing blurbs, I'm a good writer, doesn't mean I'm just going to find it easy to write a book. And similarly, I'm not suggesting all authors find it really easy to write a book because I know that's a long and winding road. But you might have got to a point where you feel really confident writing novels and you're sitting there writing your blurb, and a lot of authors beat themselves up and they're like, why am I so dumb? Why can't I do this? I should be able to do this. I'm a good
Yeah.
writer. And I think the really important thing to remember is that it's a different kind of writing and it is its own skill. You're magically expected to know how to do sales writing once you finish a book and you're self-published. It's like, okay, cool, sell your
Mm.
book. That's a really different thing. And I suppose my the one thing that I want to say to people is treat it like you are going back to step zero and you
Yes.
are starting with a whole new skill. And of course, you're already a trained writer, so you have that advantage. Like you will be able to put those skills to use. Those storytelling skills are crucial for writing a great book blurb. But treat
Mm.
it like it's square zero, invest time and most likely money in learning how to write a good book blurb because it will be worth it and you can do it for every book you ever write after that.
Yes. Yes,
Similarly,
absolutely.
Similarly,
Yeah.
if I can add on to that, if you're sitting here thinking this sounds like my idea of hell, recognize that that is fine. Kelly and I were talking about taxes just before we started recording. I refuse to do my taxes. It has to be my accountant. I will not do it myself. I will not log on and look at it. It needs to be my accountant because there is no world in which I ever want to look at
Mm,
those websites. It's just too boring to me and I'm not going to spend my time doing it. If you are feeling that way about blurbs right now, that is completely valid, and understanding that and knowing that about yourself will actually allow you to go, right, this is something I outsource. Give yourself
mhm.
permission to outsource. Hello, I can help you. And just take that off your plate without any shame because it is a very separate skill.
Oh,
And I think you are entitled to hand that over to someone if you don't want to learn it.
yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, writers are the best at beating themselves up for things
Hmm.
that they can't do. And it is, just from my own perspective, I have to say it is well worth the investment in
Thank you.
getting hold of Jessie if you can, um, to write that blurb, because what she does literally is magic. I have to say. So yeah, if you don't have the time or the inclination to write your own blurb, outsource it. I think that's a great piece of advice. So you mentioned self-published before, and this is what this podcast is really all about, is helping out self-published authors or author-published authors. So, and you, I know you're a very strong supporter of the author community in general. Obviously, you have to be with what you do. Um, so, what would be one standout moment where you realized that you felt, yeah, this here, what I'm doing now, this is what brings me joy. This is exactly where I'm meant to be. That, you know,
That's such
'cause I
a
think we all
lovely question.
yeah.
That's such a lovely question. I think it's really hard to pick a standout moment because I'm so touched by the gratitude of authors that I work with every single week. There's someone on social media or in my inbox being like, "Oh, you taught me this thing and now this is easy," or I had someone come to me and actually tell me like how many hours they spent on the blurb and how many thousands of words they wrote trying to write their blurb. And then I had rewritten the blurb for her and she was just like, "And you got it in one," like this is, and I think for me, especially as like I will always identify first and foremost as a teacher. For me, that is just my whole life's vocation is giving people that light bulb moment slash taking away the pain if I can.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think wherever I am doing that, I feel so at home and so honored to be a part of people's creative journeys. And I feel so appreciated, which is just so lovely, just so lovely. So much unsolicited gratitude just comes at me so regularly. I never expected to end up here, but it really does feel like the right place for me. And it's just so wonderful to be able to help with this weird niche little skill that I have.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you really nailed it. So for me as an ex-teacher as well, this is why we do this. We don't do what we do for, with the expectation that people will fall at our feet with
Mm,
gratitude. But it is
no.
those, just those little, sometimes they throw away comments that you're like, yeah, okay, this is, I helped this person, I made a difference, and that
Yes.
sort of thing. And that's why we do what we do.
Yeah. The
Money's
problem solving is so
not,
addictive to me. Like I want if I can if I've solved your problem, I'm just so happy because it means that I've just, cracked that code. And that's all
yes,
I want to do is solve problems. And there like, there are so many different books. There are so many different blurb problems that come up from day to day. People are always welcome to slide into my inbox or my DMs and ask questions because I often create content out of them. And it's
yeah.
really helpful for me to know what people are struggling with as well, because I always want to find a way to just explain it, to clarify it, and to make it no longer a problem. It's so exciting to me.
Yes, yes. And to say your teacher background's just so evident here
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
Like
That's the
it's
biggest
that
compliment.
it is it's yeah, it's like that you do have that, as teachers you do have that sort of, it's almost this innate need to explain and to help and that sort of
Mm.
thing. So um I'm going to sum up with a curly question, which I'm really hoping you read through the questions that I sent
I
you.
did. I've come prepared. It's okay.
So the final question really is, that if you had to write the blurb for your own work life, what would it say?
I think it would say Jessie Cunniffe likes her work days like she likes her blurbs, short and sweet.
Oh, I love that.
I'm a very like deep focus 3 to 4 hours, and then I'm a huge believer in taking a lot of creative rest. I definitely didn't do that in my first couple of years of BBM and found out the hard way that, I'm delving in and out of, oh my goodness, I don't even know how many books a month, a week. There's like a minimum of like 5 or 6 a week, different books that I'm dipping in and out of and understanding stories. And some weeks it's a lot more, and that's actually quite a big cognitive load. I'm really have to absorb people's plots and understand character motivations and everything. And I love that, but I have to give my brain so much rest. So that's what I've learned, and I think authors probably you probably need more creative. If you're listening to this, you probably need more creative rest. We all do.
Oh, creative rest. I need an extra 24 hours of my day for creative rest, I think. Um, just thinking about this, and this isn't something that I sent, but I was just thinking in terms of costing and fees and that sort of thing. And a lot of people out there do not understand why services that you provide, services that I provide are quite, for want of a better word, quite expensive.
Mm,
Um, it's this for you writing a book blurb. This is not just about sitting down and banging out 160 words. You have to
mm,
understand the story, right?
mm.
So, do you read the entire story? Do you talk to the author a lot? How do you get that? Because to write a blurb, you can't just write a blurb without having an understanding of the story.
Yeah, so I read a synopsis, and before everybody freaks out, the synopsis that I ask of you is very like word vomit, pretend I'm sitting in front of you. I don't ask for anything polished. In fact, I find it harder when authors have sent me really polished synopses and I hear less of their voice and less
Yeah.
of the little asides and random things, like so and so is really mad at such and such because they did this in book two. Like, those little things. I actually find it harder. So I literally like a five, I don't even put a word limit on it, but like probably in the vicinity of 500 to 1,000 words is like totally fine. um just word vomit, just write out in bullet points what happens in your story, what happens next, kind of thing. And from that I glean a lot about the author voice, the intention, because the important thing is I'm not the target audience for every single book. So if I were to read every single book, I'm then filtering it through my own, we're all subjective human beings, and I didn't think that that was very helpful. Plus, I'm not a fast reader. Like, I'm not a fast reader. I would not be able to
Mm,
help as many people as I do. So, I actually like the synopsis because it allows me to quickly absorb what the book is meant to be and
mm,
how the author wants to present it as well. I usually ask for the manuscript as well so that I can then dip into it and look at the tone and make sure that I haven't misunderstood anything, that it's lined
mm,
up. Sometimes I have quick questions to answer. But it is a fair bit of, yeah, reading and absorbing and then trying to decide, well, what is it that stands out to me? What are the themes or
mm.
the plot threads that I think are speaking to me? And then it feels like translating that into a different medium, kind of.
Yeah. So my point really is, and I'm so glad that you explained that, that the bulk of what you do is actually understanding the story and
Mm,
understanding the author's voice. And that takes time, and
mm,
time is money. So
mm.
for anybody who thinks, oh, okay, you used to do them for $20 a pop, and that
Yes.
back in the day and that sort of thing. But honestly, you get what you pay for these
You do.
days
And for me, it's
as well.
also,
So
it makes me think of the excellent, I think it was, Picasso's story where he scribbled a drawing on a napkin, and this lady at the cafe was like, "Oh my goodness, like, can I have that?" And he said, "Sure, that'll be, I don't know, 30 grand, whatever." And she's like,
yeah,
"How dare you? Like, that only took you like 30 seconds." And he said, "No, it took me 30 years." So
yes,
there is also that
yep,
wealth of background and things that I think all creatives bring. And I actually think, as you were saying that, time is money. The way that books are priced definitely don't reflect that for for authors, which can be really frustrating. And that's a
yes,
big part of why, like, my business, yeah, it's expensive to have me write a blurb. But I mean, as one of my recent clients said, just like I expect to make that back in book sales down the track because
Yes.
otherwise my book isn't going to sell. And also my courses are under $100 because and they're lifetime access as well. So if you want to learn to do it yourself, that's the real true budget option. You could get your blurb price down to like 10 cents a book if you keep writing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do like to make sure that there are like lots of options for all different budgets because I know self-publishing is expensive and you're absolutely right. You do get what you pay for. In my own business, I found that time and again as well. Um,
Mm.
but I love to offer options depending on how much you want to learn and, and how
Yes,
quickly.
which is fantastic to have those options. So for me, I take the lazy option, and I would definitely ask Jessie to write my blurb, which I
And
have
I'd be very happy to do so.
absolutely. So before we go, Jessie, thank you so much. And I'm hoping, I know actually I'm not hoping, I know that anybody listening will have basically be blown away by what you do and just thinking might have come into the podcast thinking, oh, it doesn't take that much to write a blurb and gone away going, wow, new respect. So can you please let listeners know how they can engage your services, find out about your courses and all the other little bits and pieces that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. The absolute number one way I would recommend you start with me is go to anatomyofabbookblurb.com and download the free cheat sheet. Not just because you get the free cheat sheet, but because it puts you on my email list. And I take my email list extremely seriously. I even teach email marketing to authors as well. I'm obsessed with it. I email my list 5 times a week with blurb advice. And it is the kind of advice where I actually had a student tell me recently he has printed out every email I have sent, which is about like 100,000 words since the beginning of 2024. And he has it in a binder on his shelf and he's like highlighted, made notes. I get people telling me every week that they learn a lot from my emails as well. So if you are on a budget, free cheat sheet and my emails is an incredible way to start. You can, of course, unsubscribe at any time. I know that's too many emails for some people, but I'm hardcore about my emails. so so come and stay as long as you like and you can leave anytime as well. I also hang out on Instagram and Threads an unhealthy amount. So my handle is Book Blurb Magic. Come and slide into my DMs, ask me questions. If you're trying to decide what service or course would be best for you. And if you just want to browse everything, it's all at bookblurbmagic.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jessie. It's just been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Um, and yeah, go forth and learn how to write blurbs or get Jessie to do it for you.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
Thank you.